Hello and welcome back for another GiantSlayerTV Top 10 video. Today's video will be a countdown of the top champions for rank play in patch 12.4b. The whole landscape of the meta has changed with the mid-set being released, as well as an entirely new meta after the B patch nerfed quite a few comps. We're now seeing a lot of emphasis on reroll compositions and less high-cost units in the meta. Our top 10 today will reflect that, as well as cover the champions we think are the most consistent. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. As usual, we'll be starting our list off with a 1-cost unit. The champion coming in at number 10 is Ezreal. Surprisingly, there are quite a few potential candidates for this spot on the list. 1-costs are generally weaker on average than every other tier of unit, but in Neon Knights, the value of 1-cost is rated just a bit higher. Champions like Jarvan that buff attack speed of nearby units, or Caitlyn that can one-shot the majority of squishy champions at low levels. For the 10th spot on the list, we were torn between 3 units: Nocturne, Kassadin, and Ezreal. Nocturne was a nominee because he does so well as an early game item holder and has 2 useful early game synergies with Assassin and Hextech. But post nerfs to Hextech, we feel he had less value than the other 2 units. Kassadin will be giving more of a shout out later on, but the main value of him is being a tanky early game champion that can increase the mana of enemy units. Ezreal takes the cake primarily because of his synergies. Scrap and Innovators are going strong, particularly in the early stages of the game. Thanks to Scrap, Ezreal can effectively hold 2 or 3 items, whereas most early game item holders are on average just going to hold 1, maybe 2 if the player got lucky on their components. This is thanks to both Scrap and Ezreal's ability as an attack speed boost, meaning auto attack items or on-hit items are amazing on him. Compared to the other champions we considered, what truly sets Ezreal apart is scaling. Ezreal can be used all the way into stage 4 or even 5 if needed because of how effectively he can hold onto items, plus Scrap and Innovator have good scaling. That means you can keep Ezreal in for longer until you find a proper transition, whereas the other 1-cost units, you're either committing heavily to something like Twitch or transitioning out of it in stage 3. All in all, Ezreal is still up there with the best of the best, even in the new mid-set. Let's move on to the next champion, coming in at number 9, Renata. Renata is one of the new champions introduced with the mid-set Neon Knights. Had we made this list a few days ago prior to the B patch, Renata would have likely been number 2 on the list, but after the nerfs, we're cautious about how valuable she still is in the meta. But despite the nerfs, Renata still brings a lot to the table. Whereas before the nerfs, Renata was both insanely good utility and damage, after she's more about utility thanks to the attack speed reduction effect of her ability. The damage is still there, of course, but it takes more time to ramp up to lethal levels than before. Think of Renata more about utility, with the damage she does as complementary to your main carry. Another benefit to running Renata is how well she pairs with Silco even after the nerfs. Being able to get a quick cast off is key for this champion, and items plus Silco make that dream a reality. This then starts stacking damage on the enemy board, lowers their attack speed, and generally also applies Morellonomicon, which is by far the best item for Renata. Playing Renata and Silco together provides the Scholar trait, which passively buffs your whole board. Overall, we are a bit cautious in regards to where Renata sits in the meta, but she's still one of the most well-rounded utility units that you can play in most comps. Another champion hit by the nerf bat is Sejuani. Despite that nerf, she still is coming in at number 8 on today's list. Another case of had we made this list just a few days before the B patch, a champion like Sejuani would have likely been much higher. And paired along with Sejuani would have been Rek'Sai. Post nerfs though, Rek'Sai was essentially gutted completely out of the meta until they can further rework her in future patches. Sejuani, on the other hand, is still a valuable member of the frontline committee and works tirelessly to provide a stable frontline for you and many other players. Now you may be wondering why Sejuani gets to be on the list when she got nerfed pretty heavily. Basically, Sejuani is just a better frontline champion than Rek'Sai. Sejuani provides CC while also making herself tankier on top of being a Bruiser, Hextech, and Enforcer. With triple tags relevant to the meta and being harder to kill, it should be clear as to why Sejuani is still a valuable champion. Due to those traits, Sejuani remains relevant throughout the game, whereas Rek'Sai is just a trait bot. Compared to other low-cost frontline units, Sejuani is by far the best, even after being nerfed. So it just goes to show that even after they apply nerfs that seem like a lot, a champion can still be good, such as the case with Sejuani. On down to number 7 we go, with Tryndamere. With the meta shifting towards low-cost boards and a lot of rerolling, the value of Tryndamere carry goes up dramatically. Before the B patch, Tryndamere reroll was definitely viable and had a decent place in the meta. After the patch, that value has gone up even more, especially in lobbies where other players are also playing reroll builds. The more players reroll, the more likely you, as the Tryndamere player, are going to hit, and once Tryndamere is 3-star, he's a beast. Granted, Tryndamere 3 is not unbeatable. The largest issue that plagues any would-be Tryndamere player is that, despite doing decent damage and being mobile, Tryndamere is a big ol' troll. Once he has the mana to cast, he will dash away and leave the target he was beating up bruised, but alive. That's not inherently a bad thing because Tryndamere is likely to survive until the end and clean up. But in a reroll meta, it can be painful to watch the enemy 3-star carry barely survive because your Tryndamere got distracted by something shiny in the opposite corner. That all said, if you want a semi-reliable, low-cost carry with mobility, backline access, and flexible items, then Tryndamere is the carry for you. Next up is another 3-cost doing well in the meta, Morgana. Morgana comes in at number 6. Meta dust hasn't completely settled since the B patch, but one thing is clear, low-cost units are ruling the meta in a lot of ways. We've got reroll builds popping up everywhere, and one champion to take note of is Morgana. Morgana provides a decent frontline as her ability both shields herself and can CC. That alone isn't necessarily enough, but being an Enchanter makes Morgana even more valuable, especially considering other Enchanters are doing alright in the meta, like Senna. Of course, we can't say that Morgana is enough of a frontline for the majority of boards, but there's a huge increase in board power when a player hits Morgana 3. And as we said, rerolling is common right now, so you're likely to see Morgana 3 every other game at a minimum. After the removal of Janna and Taric, it did seem like Enchanters got weaker in the meta, but at least for now, Morgana is proving that assessment wrong and is definitely a champion we recommend playing. Right smack dab in the middle of the top 10 is our number 5 champion, Echo. Somehow, someway, they managed to make Echo even better in the mid-set. How did they do that? By giving him the Innovator tag. Now Echo is the linchpin to many early game compositions, as well as necessary for any would-be Innovator players in the mid-game. We should acknowledge that yes, they did nerf Echo in the B patch. But big deal, a nerf isn't enough to stop the triple tag 3 cost with a good utility ability like Echo. Adding Innovator to Echo has been a major game changer and even reinvigorated an old composition from Gizmos and Gadgets, Twitch Reroll. Being an assassin that pairs with Twitch and Singed means that the composition can transition easily into an Innovator mid-game. And of course, Scrap is still doing well, which Echo also enables. If they really want Echo to have less value in the meta, they may have to consider reverting the triple traits they've given him because it's unlikely we'll see Echo not in our top 10 for the rest of the mid-set. Up next is a champion we're not entirely sure deserves the number 4 spot, Sivir. The reason we're hesitant about placing Sivir right here is she was nerfed in multiple ways. Less attack damage, slightly reduced attack speed, and of course the major nerfs to Hextech. Despite those changes, Sivir still seems to be doing well in the meta. As it turns out, having an ability that increases a carry's attack speed and also bounces damage between enemy units is quite good. It's also worth noting that they did a quality of life change for Sivir where she would sometimes cancel her attacks when her ability was active. With that not happening anymore, Sivir attacks far more consistently, which may be why she's still doing well after the B patch. Or maybe it's because Sivir is just a good champion and despite the nerfs has multiple ways to be played. Regardless of why she's doing well, if you're still wanting to play a 4-cost carry because rerolling isn't appealing to you, Sivir is our recommendation. Just try out playing Striker more than Vertical Hextech as it's more likely to succeed. The winner of the B patch is our number 3 champion, Talon. Out of nowhere, off the top rope, from the shadows, Talon is here in the meta. What seemed like an impossibility after the removal of Imperial, Talon is once again here being rerolled and wrecking the meta. The main reason for this is the shift in the meta towards rerolling, where VIP Talon is easy to hit and you can put together a quick board with low-cost Debonair and Assassin champions. Talon then does a boatload of damage with his bleed and is slightly tankier thanks to the Debonair trait. While we can't say for certain this reroll meta will last, at least for now, if you're looking to climb the ladder, then we definitely point towards rerolling Talon as the way to do it. Interestingly enough, the number 2 champion on our list, Vi, was untouched by the nerfs. Sure, they technically nerfed Bruisers in general because Rek'Sai got a lot weaker and Sejuani was also nerfed, but that doesn't matter too much for Vi. The fact is, Vi got a huge glow up with the mid-set after being changed into a 4-cost champion with an ability that provides good damage and utility. Bruisers are still doing well even with Rek'Sai nerf, especially because you gain Enforcer when pairing Vi and Sejuani together. That combination makes playing a mid-game Bruiser board quite successful. And that success is definitely on the shoulders of Vi, who punches her way to winning rounds almost by herself. We're interested to see where the meta goes and whether or not Vi remains as strong as she currently is. And finally, our number 1 champion is Silco. Silco has to be one of the strongest 5-costs we've ever had in TFT because even after the nerfs, he's still the best all-around champion. Maybe it's the arcane buff or because he's unique to TFT, but Silco is ridiculously good. Much like Yuumi, Silco is a standalone unit that you can splash into any composition and gain immediate value from. While Yuumi provides CC, Silco enables your CC and other utility champions with Mastermind. Then he causes champions to go crazy and Hulk out the enemy team. We will say that Silco is definitely teetering on the edges of Abyss with the B-patch nerfs. He's still by far the best standalone champion, but any more nerfs can cause him to fall out of the meta entirely. But for now, if you're hitting the late game and don't know what champion to play at level 8 or 9, Silco is the best option by far. Alright folks, that's it for our top 10 champions for patch 12.4b. We're not quite done though, as we have a few honorable mentions to talk about. First is a champion we mentioned earlier, Kassadin. Kassadin deserves a shout out for holding down the early game as one of the better non-bruiser frontline units in the meta. With good survivability and an ability with a lot of utility, Kassadin is definitely a worthwhile investment in stage 2 if you can 2-star him. That said, with mutants taking a hit from the Rek'Sai nerf and the other late game scholars being more useful, Kassadin does sadly fall off quickly. But in stage 2, he's quite good. Our other honorable mention is Victor. Even though the meta is reroll centric, Victor is still a worthwhile consideration for late game boards as one of the few AP champions that can pump out a lot of consistent damage. Most notably is when Victor is played alongside Silco, as that duo is disgustingly good. We don't recommend forcing Victor boards, but if you do find him in your shop, playing him can be worthwhile for sure. Alright folks, that's all we have for you for today. The meta is still being figured out after the B patch, so expect to see a lot of champions rise and fall, especially since patch 12.5 is on the horizon. Let us know in the comment section below what new champion from the mid-set is your favorite. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.